So Dan, why don't you tell me where you're from and when you graduated from Augsburg?
I am from Long Island, New York, and I graduated from Augsburg College in 2005.
What was your major? What did you do here? What were you?
English. I was an English major. I was focused on writing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So, where are you now? What are you doing with yourself since you've graduated?
I am in Los Angeles. I've been out here for a little over 2 years, and I work in the film industry.
Do you think Augsburg helped prepare you for that? That was kind of the direction that you were looking to go into.
Yeah, that's the direction. Yeah, I've always wanted to work in this industry. There was a period at Augsburg where I thought that I might become a teacher because I thought that working in the film industry was an unrealistic goal. But by the time I was in my senior year, I knew that that's still what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in the film industry, and certain advisors helped me a lot in plotting kind of my course of action of how I would achieve that once I graduated.
Do you have any plans for the future? Do you have any goals? Are you planning on going back to school?
I hope to never go back to school. I mean, like, my least favorite thing about going to Augsburg was definitely class and studying and doing homework and taking tests and, like, the school part of it. So I hope to never do any of that again. But my goals for the future are, I'd love to make my living as a screenwriter specifically in this industry, and I do a lot of that. I like my writing on the side. Yeah, that's the big dream. That's the big goal, is to make my living as a screenwriter.
Augsburg pretty much set you up for that. You were doing a lot of writing when you were here, and I remember it was a blast. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Your articles were great.
Thank you.
They were always so funny.
Well, I was always really grateful to have friends like you who I could give them to and get feedback from and encouragement from. And also, the writing classes that I took, taught me how to structure my writing and how to edit, how to do rewrites. I didn't really know how to do that before I went to Augsburg, and I would always just kind of have an idea and write it down, and it wouldn't really come out the way I wanted it to, and I would just kind of give up. So, that's kind of the most important thing I learned at Augsburg.
Everything seemed to work out. Did you go through a little bit of rough times after you left, after you were done? Or was it pretty much like smooth sailing when you left?
I think the roughest time I went through after graduating from Augsburg was about 2 days after I walked. I had a job at Jimmy John's as a delivery guy, and it was my first night on the job. This was 2 days after I graduated, and I got pulled over, and the cop told me that my license had been suspended for 9 months prior, and my car got towed.
That's awesome. The down point after graduating.
Yeah, it was 2 days after graduating that happened. And it wasn't that big of a deal. I was able to get my license back the next day. I just had to pay a really big fine. No, things were really cool. What happened was, so back up, senior year, I've decided, I've come to the realization that I don't want to be a teacher. I want to work in the film industry. And I go to Dave Haddon, who's always been a really good advisor, and I say, this is what I want to do. And he said, okay, here's how you do that. And he told me to make a list of every contact I had in the film industry and then call all of them. And I said, I don't really have any contacts in the film industry. And he said, yes, you do. You know people who know people. You have friends who have friends. You have friends who have relatives. You have relatives who have friends, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wrote all of these sixth degree contacts that I had, and then I called those people, and they gave me the numbers of the people they knew, and I did this, and then by the time we had spring break, what I did is I went out to LA, and I met with a bunch of these contacts that I had been talking to over the phone to kind of get a feel for, what my next steps would be after graduating. Mm-hmm. And these are all, some were like Dan Bizance's brother's friends, mm-hmm. and my dad had a friend who had a brother and stuff like that, and Eric Helgeson had an old family friend that worked out here. And they all said, just come out here. You're never going to secure a job from Minnesota in LA. No one's going to hire someone who lives in Minnesota. So you just got to get out here, and then, talk to us, and we'll put you in touch with people. And so I did. After graduation, I hung out in Minneapolis for about 6 months. I had 2 part-time jobs. The plan was to save up a little money for when I moved out. I wound up not saving any money, but it was still like a nice time. It was a nice breather after graduating to just kind of take those 6 months. I knew that I was like June and that by January I was going to be leaving, so it was a nice breathing room to spend time with my friends, kind of like one last time before I left. And then at the end of the year, I moved out to LA and I met with all these contacts again, and it helped me get work pretty quickly. Like the first couple of jobs I had were these temporary assistant jobs that I had gotten through a friend of Dan Bazant's brother. So it was an Augsburg contact that helped me get work for the first few months out in LA. And eventually I wound up working at this post-production company where I'm still at today, and that's the company that is owned by brother of a friend of my father. So, I mean, things have worked out pretty smoothly throughout. It hasn't been that much of a rough transition. The big thing, it was always to remain in contact with these people and to ask questions. What do I need to do? What do you suggest? Do you know anyone that I can talk to about this? To take those suggestions and do those things. That's really it.
That's actually makes me feel a little better about graduating, because you kind of had everything ready. Like you knew what you were going to do before you left, and you had everything set in motion.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was, I'm very fortunate. I mean, the reason I've been able to maintain the job is because I developed a work ethic, which I kind of never really had before. So that's how, I've been able to maintain, but the reason I got the job is just through people I knew and being willing to ask for help. And I think, most people can do that if they're willing to take a shot. There are a couple of people who left a significant mark on me, and one of them, a big inspiration for this plan was Dad Little. He was a tough professor, and he's a good professor, but I was such a slacker in his class. Not the best English student. Actually, Pete Leifman and I used to joke about the fact that we were probably the 2 worst English majors in our graduating class, and that all the teachers gave us B's and B pluses out of just pity or because they didn't want to see us again. They wanted it to just kind of shuffle us through the system. But Dan Little, I remember one time I was meeting with him, and he was like, "What do you think you're going to do after you graduate?" And at that point, I was thinking maybe I'd go to Hazelden, become a drug counselor. Mm-hmm. That was another brief, when I was like, I don't really want to be a teacher. Maybe I'll do this. I'll be a counselor. And he was like, "Oh, that's a noble thing to do." And I said, "Yeah, and I think that it's kind of safe. Yeah, there are a lot of rehabs. They're always going to need counselors. It would be like a safe thing for work." And he said, "Can I give you a piece of advice?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Don't do the safe thing. You're about to graduate college. You're young. Now is the time for you to try to do what you want to do. You can always be safe later." That really pushed me to pursue doing what I do now, and I definitely owe him for that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sharing with us your story. You got a good one too. You got a good story.
That's how I do.